All right, let's do this. Somehow, some way, we have made it to the end of another year. And just like last year, I am rounding up the top 10 moments that happened here on my YouTube channel. If you're listening to this as a podcast, you'll hear all of these top moments too. I love doing this roundup so you can really get a sense of what are the things that resonated with other people, and are there tips, tricks, ideas, validation that you missed out on that you might want a little refresher on? Let's get into the 10 top moments of the year here on Mind Money Balance. Number 10 is the win-win that happens when you pay your credit balance in full and on time. Banks will reward you with a higher credit score when you pay your balance in full and on time, and you'll also be rewarded because you're not paying interest. So make sure that you pay your full credit card balance. Number 9, when talking about the different money archetypes, if you don't know your archetype yet, you should definitely take the quiz and find out. It's this example of why it's so important for you to nurture other parts of your life outside of just what you do for work or how you earn your money. Research shows that when people retire, if they have one singular tie to their identity that is career and money related, for example, I was a superintendent at school and I retire. If I don't have any other identities outside of being a superintendent at school, my likelihood to develop clinical depression is much higher than the superintendent who had additional identities, meaning they had additional interests. Yes, they were a superintendent, but they also were in a gardening club, and they also volunteered at the food shelter, and they also made a pact to travel with their college buddies once every single year. And they also believed in being a really good auntie, right? So when we have diverse interests outside of money and career, we are more likely to be able to tolerate the discomfort that happens when one of those identities is compromised. So for example, we've got these two superintendents. If they both lose their jobs, the person who has other areas to lean on, other life domains that they are invested in, is more likely to be more resilient than the person whose entire identity was tied up in that one job of being superintendent. So the reason that I want these admirers to really move out of their career and their identity being everything is that it's a protective mechanism. So I invite them to think about how they can take that intensity and kind of share the love and spread it around. Number 8 is building up self-trust from this video, self-trust and money. This particular snippet about making sure that you're not dismissing what you've achieved financially was a hit. Underestimating your own knowledge and your own financial abilities. But this one specifically, underestimating your knowledge or your abilities, is dismissing how much you know or how far you've come. For example, maybe you haven't started saving for retirement. And even though you haven't started saving for retirement, you've done a really good job of managing day-to-day and month-to-month expenses. And you have evidence of this because you pay your rent in full and on time. You've always made your car payments. You even have the ability to do things like pay for your car insurance 6 months at a time to get that discount. But instead of acknowledging the 3 things that you're doing really well, you tell yourself, well, I'm not that smart. I don't have the ability to manage my money because I'm not saving for retirement yet. Number 7 was a reminder that quiet luxury is out, and this trend was very in 2024. TikToker Lucas Battle said what was out was quiet luxury, and went on to talk about how loud budgeting is really what's in for this year. They say that loud budgeting is all about being really clear about your financial goals, communicating it to your friends, to your family, and being really clear about when you want to say no and giving people a little bit more information than maybe they were used to getting in the past. This, my friends, is another way to say having a boundary. As a therapist, boundaries come up all the time because I think, quite frankly, they are often misconstrued or misunderstood. A boundary is something that you as the person says, here are my expectations and here are my limits, and these are the things I will and won't tolerate. A boundary is not expecting other people to do things differently. It's just saying, here's where I'm at. Here's what works for me, here's what doesn't, and making it really clear about the types of things you will or won't engage in. Number 6, some holiday-specific spending swaps. That is a lot of S's so that you can take care of yourself, not just financially, but emotionally too. So if we know that we might be spending money in order to get a chemical need met, I want to give you some examples of holiday-specific swaps that you might want to try out to continue practicing financial self-care during the holidays. For example, if you're tempted to buy something for yourself when you are out shopping for other people on the list that you have already budgeted for or allocated money for, you might be craving serotonin, right? You might be craving that happiness, that evenness. So other ways to get that serotonin fix would be to do something like when you get home that night and do your skincare routine, putting on a face mask before bed, or engaging in a gratitude practice of writing down 3 to 5 things that you are grateful for at the end of the day. That would be an example of a swap. If you feel like you are buying something because you want to avoid FOMO, that fear of missing out piece is all about community. So you might be craving oxytocin. Instead of buying that thing because you want to feel included socially, what are other ways you can have your social needs met? Call your friends, text your friends, engage in a group activity, or, if those things aren't available to you, cuddle with a pet. And finally, if you're feeling tempted to buy because of a limited time offer, because of a sale, but you really don't need that thing, this is probably dopamine. That urge to buy something that's time limited is often associated with that feeling of reward or anticipation. So to swap that out, we want to look for how are ways that you can get your dopamine fix met without spending money. That might be something like organizing your to-do list or completing something that's been hanging out on your task list for a long time. Accomplishing those small wins or those small goals can also give you a dopamine boost. This next clip is a reminder that you are not imagining it. Food is hella expensive. Let's just acknowledge that food is super expensive, and it's one of the biggest expenses that Americans cite. According to the 2022 Bureau of Labor Statistics, the 3 top expenses for most Americans are housing, transportation, and then food. As we get into how to save money on food, the first thing I want you to do is look at your trash can. Not like, is it a stainless trash can? Is it under the sink trash can? I'm talking about what's in it. What food at the end of each week are you tossing into the trash can? Or if you're lucky enough to have city compost, what are you throwing into compost? And if you're feeling a little embarrassed about the amount of food you're throwing away, sadly, you're not alone. According to Recycle Track Systems, almost 40% of the amount of food that's produced in the United States ends up in the trash. This ends up being about 325 pounds of food per person every single year that we throw in the garbage. They help us to visualize how much food we're actually tossing by imagining 975 apples just filling up a giant trash can. That's how much food we're throwing away. And instead of beating ourselves up, I invite us to maybe just stop buying the things that we throw away in the first place. Number 4, a very boring part of my money routine that for some reason was really exciting to everybody else. Monthly, my money routine looks like this. I open up my checking account and I go, does that look right? It does. Terrific. And monthly, I'm also making sure that all of my credit cards that are on auto pay are actually still on auto pay. At this stage in my life and my relationship with money, for me, making sure everything that I have set up to be working is still working is the most important thing. My money routine may be different than yours. I prefer to be a bit more hands-off. If you take my quiz on which financial archetype you are, I am blissfully indifferent. That is the person who doesn't really like looking at money or thinking about it or talking about it, which is why I probably do what I do. Because if I was left to my own devices, this is how I would manage my money, which is not great. So instead, what I have done, the money routine that works best for me, is making things as automatic as possible. So that's what I'm doing monthly. I'm making sure that the bills that I have on auto pay are actually being paid. The savings goals that I have are actually being funded. That is what I'm doing. I'm just making sure my little money machine is moving in the way that I want it to be moving. Number 3, what our negative money thoughts have to do with how we behave with our money and the money decisions that we make. So cognitive behavioral therapy asserts that if we have a thought that isn't 100% truthful, the term they usually use is a cognitive distortion or a mental filter. You can use whatever language which feels good for you. Sometimes I think cognitive distortion sounds a little harsh, and some people like that term. So if that resonates with you, great. But the idea is that oftentimes when we are struggling with our mental health, even if you don't have a diagnosis, we tend to think in ways that are far more negative than what is actually happening in reality. And these cognitive distortions might look like black and white thinking, such as I either do this or I'm a failure. And when it comes to money, it might look like if I don't have an emergency fund, then I'm terrible at money. So it's like good, bad, right, wrong. There's not a lot of space for nuance. Another example of a common type of mental filter is catastrophizing. This is where you not only jump to conclusions, but you imagine that things are going to be worse than they usually are, or you're imagining the absolute worst case scenario. Sometimes our mental filters or cognitive distortions are around an inability to see things any differently. So it can make it hard to take in other people's opinions or see other options to solve a problem that we're experiencing. And the idea is if we take this thought that isn't super helpful, what we can do is look at it with nuance. How true is this thought? Like, what evidence do I have that this is a fact? And what evidence do I have that this might not be fully true? And what might be some ways that I could reframe or soften it to be far more realistic? The second most watched or most rewatched thing here on the Mind Money Balance channel was a common frustration that I see, whether I'm facilitating a workshop or working with somebody one-on-one, but this frustration that once you have enough money, that all of a sudden everything will just be easy or life will be happier or better. And it's supposed to just like cut across the board, and the frustration that comes if it doesn't feel that way. When folks who have experienced lifestyle creep come into work with me, they often feel frustrated and confused because they say things like, oh, I thought I'd be happy when I earned more, or I thought I'd feel better when I paid off my debt. And there may be that initial excitement or that initial rush of endorphins when you pay off that loan or when you get that raise, because the excitement of accomplishing something generally feels good. But what people are getting at when they bring this frustration to me is they thought in general things would just feel better. And oftentimes when I'm talking with them about what's going on, they share with me that these things that used to be one-offs are the norm or are the baseline. And they thought that having those treats become the baseline would inherently increase their happiness, contentment, or joy. This is why I think we need to be really mindful about lifestyle creep. To be clear, I think having more cash flow in a month-to-month basis is generally a net positive thing. And I also don't think that as we earn more money, we should just funnel it all away and not enjoy it. I absolutely think we should enjoy the additional cash flow that we have. And in order to do that, I think this is where doing a little values assessment can be incredibly helpful. Let's say you value spending quality time and having a lot of connection outside of your working hours. When you experience an increase in your cash flow, you may intentionally decide to spend more money outsourcing some of those tasks that take away from your ability to spend time with family, such as maybe outsourcing your laundry and having once a month wash and fold service. You might decide to buy pre-chopped fruits or vegetables to help expedite your meal prep process. Those things are going to feel really good and in general will help to increase that overall sensation of feeling good when you earn more money, because they are aligned with the values in financially supporting some of those tasks that had been weighing you down. And drum roll, please. The top moment this year was understanding where behavioral finance came from and how we can take it away from marketers and from business and use it to make sure that we're doing wise things with our money. I was recently asked how long the field of financial therapy has been around, and my response was, look, behavioral finance and the psychology of money has been around for a very long time. It's just within the past 10 to 15 years that people in the field of psychology have said, maybe we should take all of this stuff that people are using to trick people into spending more money and actually empower consumers and individuals so they can learn how they're being tricked and stop spending so much money on things that they might not even want or need. I cannot unsee an old tweet that TikTok is basically our generation's home shopping network, or HSN. And it's really true. From hauls talking about what people bought at big box stores to thrifting, It doesn't matter. Shopping is everywhere. And I want to talk about some of the new consumerism tricks that you might not be as aware of that are taking money from you that you don't actually want to be spending. Again, this is not about shaming you if you are a shopper and you have the means to shop and spend money in that way. This is really about making sure that you're aware of why you're spending the way that you're spending and just kind of holding a mirror or shining a light on some of the different tricks of the trade that these marketing gurus are doing to get you to spend your hard-earned cash on things that you might not really want or need. What a year! Thank you so much for watching, for engaging, for listening to the podcast, for sharing my things out on Instagram. Every single time that you engage, it helps the algorithm, the dreaded algorithm, understand that this is content that you want more of, and it helps improve the way that I show up here, what I talk about, and of course, remains free for you to access and consume. If you want to see some of these tips infused in real life, you want to work with me, did you know that you can hire me to come in and facilitate a workshop? You can. There are a few different ways that we can work together, and you can see the power of how talking about money and emotions and all other aspects of our life can connect and make you, your team, your colleagues feel more comfortable in terms of their relationship with money. I can come to you virtually or in person and host a financial wellness workshop, or you can bring me in for a half day or full day retreat. You provide the setting, I'll provide the financial wellness content, and together we'll create an experience for your team, your organization that works for you and really helps you feel good about money. If you're interested, all you have to do is go to mindmoneybalance.com/speaking. I will link it in the description, or if you're listening to this as a podcast, it will be in the show notes. If you're listening to this in real time, I hope you have a beautiful holiday season and a happy new year. Thanks as always for being here.